Welcome back to the Connors and Ferris High School Sports Show, brought to you by Salvatore's Pizza. Our next guest, Steve Bradley, is our former colleague with the Democrat Chronicle. Like a lot of people we talk about these days, our former colleague with the Democrat Chronicle. John Moriello, the president of the New York State Sportswriters Association. And John, longtime friend of the program, one of the most knowledgeable guys in New York State on high school sports. I'm just going to start out with the big question, in my opinion, John. Do you think there will be a season of any sort for these high-risk sports in the winter, such as basketball and wrestling?
No, I don't see that happening. We're very far into what the season should be right now. Basketball should have tipped off Thanksgiving week. We're already well beyond that. The January 4th date is just a guesstimate for a start, and I look for that to be pushed back. Once that's pushed back.
It was, John Moriello, last week. It's indefinite now. It's an indefinite pause.
There you go.
Yeah.
Once you do that, you're so far into the season that it kind of becomes a moot point anyway, because what are you going to squeeze in? Are you going to be able to squeeze in 10 games under a best case scenario? And of course, all it takes, and I've said this all along, the reason why I gave up hope a long time ago for any sport this school year, all it takes is one positive test by one athlete on one team. And now you're going back and doing contact tracing on the previous opponent from 2 nights ago. You have to loop them in because they could have possibly been contaminated. You have to loop the referees in, and God knows if they're in the middle of working 4 games in 4 days, and now they've possibly contaminated athletes from other schools. That domino effect is just too risky, and I completely understand why superintendents are reluctant.
Now, what in your mind makes a sport like hockey different than soccer and field hockey, which played in the fall?
Oh, it doesn't. Steve, I'm puzzled how soccer and field hockey were allowed to play in the fall. If we're playing soccer, 11-on-11 soccer, the last time I looked, football is 11-on-11. Now, there is more face-to-face contact in football, obviously, but soccer, you've got those kids running the field all night long, often side by side, sometimes face to face, and somehow we let them play. I just don't understand how that happened.
Volleyball, that's why I thought volleyball got really the short end, John.
Yeah.
I thought volleyball deserved, but a lot of, from what I've heard, John, is this indoor-outdoor thing. Now, again, doesn't mean that football's outdoors, obviously. So, but I thought volleyball, and I think hockey deserves to play. I really do.
Hockey would have a fighting chance because you're playing in these arenas that have ventilation anyway. They're pumping cold air in. Well, not pumping it in, but they're keeping the place cold. You're 6-on-6 on the ice. The benches of the 2 teams can be separated easily. That's more plausible. But I would still be the Grinch, and I probably would have said from the start that we just can't risk anything this year. I hate to say it, and I love high school sports as much as anybody, but the risks, and I look at it from the point of view of the superintendents. Those guys have a short shelf life. I shouldn't just say guys, that's sexist. Those guys and women have a very short shelf life as it is. You get 5 or 6 years out of a school superintendent and you've already accomplished something. The superintendent gets a couple of kids in their school sick, theoretically through sports or actually through sports, and all of a sudden, you've got worried parents throughout the school district, and I understand the reluctance.
One thing, though, that your Twitter feed is filled with is just processes here, right? Everybody is kind of looking for Robert Zayas and the New York State Public High School Athletic Association to come down with a ruling. And right. For those who that's going to come from the governor's office, if it comes at all, correct?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I spoke to Robert a couple of days ago. We were just catching up. It had been a long time since we had spoken. People know it. I haven't blogged on high school sports in quite a while just letting this play out. But, in talking to Robert, he's constantly getting pushback from people. Why don't you talk to Cuomo about this? News alert. Nobody gets a minute with Andrew Cuomo. He's the governor. He talks to who he wishes to talk to when he wishes to speak to them. You don't just pick up the phone and say, hey, Andy, when are we going to move this thing along? So, Robert is kind of, he's highly visible in that position. He's well known because of all of the stuff that he's done and the stuff that he's accomplished in his years here in New York. But he's the easy guy to blame, and it's not in his hands. Robert could say tomorrow, let's go and play, and that's not going to do any good because the governor has emergency powers. The state legislature has rolled over and given him emergency powers, and it is strictly up to the governor.
Yeah, everybody wants somebody to make a decision, right? And that's what everyone wanted, an answer all summer long. Well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And they were looking to him, and I'm like, he's got to take his lead from the people he answers to, which is the state of New York. So I was like, really, when people were blaming, even now when I see people pointing the finger at that, and I'm not, I don't know, I've seen Robert Zayas face to face maybe 3 or 4 times in my life. It's not like we're buddies by any means, but I got to defend the guy because he answers to people way above him. And I'll say this, going back to what we talked about, just because I kept saying, John, because in a ironic way, we were very adamant about our kids, our soccer players, wearing masks. Okay, wearing masks at all times. In fact, there was a picture I saw with one of our teams where there was a huddle, and I saw a parent post it on Facebook, and they didn't have their masks up, our soccer players. And I immediately said to call the athletic director, I said, you need to address this right away. But just because it wasn't reported, because I kept on saying, at some point there's going to be a transmission from school to school on the field, athletic field, and they're not going to just shut down soccer or field hockey. They're going to shut down everything. They would shut down swimming. The whole thing would go away. And just because it wasn't reported, I'm not saying, doesn't mean it didn't happen. I find it hard to believe that it didn't happen with the close contact that existed in soccer and field hockey. That being said,
it happened repeatedly.
I'm so happy those kids got their seasons in, and that's what makes it really tough. And for these winter kids who aren't going to get a final hurrah, like we just interviewed Mariana Freeman and Sanaya Wilson and Kevin Shepard here, and Steve pointed out very astutely how all their whole careers they were the younger team, and now they're the seniors, and they're not going to get a state championship no matter what happens, if anything. And that's, to me, that's sad. So.
It is. And just to reiterate, going back for a second on the situation with Robert Zayas, just the layers in between. Robert, above Robert is the state education department, and they play musical chairs with their commissioners and their associate commissioners and so forth. They've run so many people in and out that it looks like a lacrosse sideline over there. Above them is the State Board of Regents, which controls education across the board in the state. And then you go up to the governor's office. So, again, even if the New York State Public High School Athletic Association wanted to make a decision, there are just too many levels above them to make anything happen. Biggest disappointment, biggest takeaway from all of this is we've been playing Charlie Brown and Lucy. Charlie Brown thinks he's going to kick the football, and Lucy keeps yanking it away. We've told these kids too many times over the course of the year, since midsummer, we've told them too many times, this will be the start date, and we keep pushing it back. It's getting pushed back for a good reason, but every time you push the date back or kill off a season or kill off a state tournament, you just disappoint them more.
Somebody had a good. Go ahead, Steve. We got time for one more.
Does the fall 2 season on March 1st? Is there a prayer that happens?
No, I think we end up playing. I think we end up practicing football for a couple of weeks. Might even squeeze in a game, and that'll fall apart too. If nothing else, the weather will just tear that apart.
Yeah, I've always thought the weather was going to be an issue with that. We're out of time, guys, but I want to listen. You mentioned the moving the ball, right? Well, one thing that was said in my office in the last couple of weeks was, and I'm not sure where it came from, is that they keep moving the goal. Like, we know where the goalposts are to kick the field goal, and at least they keep moving the goalposts, right? And that's tough. We were saying that in our school when it was in regard to testing. Like, what do we need to do to keep the kids in school when they move the goalposts on us again? So, John, let's get you back in here again. Hopefully, maybe we'll somehow have something magnanimous happen or amazing happen. But I appreciate you being real and being honest, and that's what we're always going to be here to do. And Doesn't mean we're not going to keep talking to athletes, folks. I really believe that that we have this venue here and to celebrate the kids, even if they aren't playing the games right now. So, John, thanks for your time as always, sir.
Jeff and Steve, always a pleasure.
Steve, that's a wrap, buddy. Episode number
14.
All right, everybody have a great holiday, a great Christmas, a great New Year's. We will see you again on January 9th. Yeah, we're taking a couple weeks off to dial it down. Thanks for listening to the Connors and Ferris High School Sports Show, brought to you by Salvatore's Pizza.